that swing arm, you shake it up and down, and it's got the clickety clunk 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 on the stand, and you're like, dang, wonder why this back end feels a little funny. And not only is your linkage shot, but you just got the most ghetto bike in the world, and the swing arm bearing is just floating back and forth, egging your case out right now. And I know plan A is like, let's get the socket, stick it in there with the vise, crank on that John, and drive this bearing out. It doesn't move and you're cranking pretty hard. Let's put some heat to it. That always works, right? There's plan B. Let's warm it up a bit, see if it moves. So you take your time, you get it pretty warm, it's heating up, and you think you're just gonna crank down on the vise and it's gonna move. Nope, still not gonna move. So you just tried plan A, you just tried plan B. And now if you don't have plan C, I strongly suggest that you call one of your buddies from Dirtbykistan. Yeah, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm outside moving firewood, so I had the Bluetooth on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry to bug you again. Technical question. Linkage bearings.
Yep.
How do you normally remove linkage bearings?
Well, usually a socket and the vise with a gentle amount. But the aluminum, it's really easy to fuck it up if you get anything cockeyed, either in the vise or the press.
Agreed. Well, let's just say that you got one of those races that's like eaten away because it's been a long time since there was anything that resembled a roller and or grease in there.
Okay.
What other techniques do you have?
Oh, alright. So are you suggesting that the outer race is too thin to press out?
Yes.
Oh, that's easy. You get in there with the Dremel tool and you cut a groove in it. I just had to do this with the Can-Am swing arm because it had those rubber bushings, and I pushed the rubber and inner bushing out, and the outer sleeve was remaining, and there's nothing to push on. So you get in there with the Dremel tool and either a carbide burr or a grinding stone, and gingerly, and I do mean gingerly, cut a groove in it. And when you're working with aluminum, it's easy because when it's not sparking, you're through. And you watch for that outer bearing race to turn blue, and that's how you know you're almost through it because it's getting hot. And once you have a good groove cut in it, then you can just get in there with with like a center punch and just like wrinkle one of the corners up, and then you can just push it out with a screwdriver usually.
Yeah, and the steel and it's hardened steel that the bearing race is, and the aluminum are two very distinct colors. So as you're grinding, and as you just bust through the steel, what you're going to notice is a darker color go to a very light, shiny aluminum because you're now in a clean aluminum. So the minute that thing touches, and you'll see, and even as you just spot it, it'll probably crack too.
So, like I said, it'll stop sparking when you hit aluminum. Because aluminum doesn't spark when you're grinding on it. But also, I like to look for that steel to turn blue as you're dremeling it, because that's how it's getting thin and it's getting hot in that spot.
Yeah.
And once you see it bluing along that groove, then
you're close. There's not enough steel there to hold it together. Yeah.
And like I said, just a little gentle is the word here. If you can do it with a junk screwdriver, but you're just trying to push on it enough to crack it on that groove, and you can usually just push it out with a screwdriver or twist it out with a needle nose or something like that.
After we removed the swing arm bearings, we cleaned the swing arm up really good, got the propane torch out, warmed the swing arm up a little bit, just hoping to expand it and make pushing the new swing arm bearings in a little bit easier. And when you get your bearings out of the box, take a look at the bearings, because the ends are different. One end's going to be rolled over, it's going to be thicker with a real sharp 90-degree bend, this end. And one end's just going to be rolled over, not at a 90-degree angle, just gently, and it's kind of rounded. don't push from that end, you'll be just squeezing the needles together. So if you need to recess the bearing, find a socket that fits inside the bore of the swing arm, drive the bearing into the proper depth, and repeat on the other side. Driving linkage bearings out, and this is a race driving punch. We could use a socket and drive the bearings right down on top of each other and push them both out the same side. But what I've found is if it's really hard to drive one bearing out, it's impossible to drive two of them out together. So using a punch allows me to get through the one bearing and just drive each of them out individually rather than trying to drive them together. And again, it's all on how hard you have to hit it with the hammer, and use some common sense. If you're beating on these races really hard, you're going to damage the aluminum linkage. And you just saw the other technique that if it's not coming out, you may have to get a Dremel out and grind through the races, and then once you crack the race, it's going to come right out. So more of the same here, warming it up with a propane torch, expanding that linkage a little bit. A lot of time was spent in just cleaning the inside bore out. That way there's nothing in the way, and we're going to find the right size bearing for this linkage. Again, look at both sides of the bearing, because there's a right side to press on and a wrong side to press on. Here's the lower linkage, and you really need to take your time and clean these up really good. So this sat in a parts washer, but it still didn't remove that grime. So if you think of brushing your teeth and there was a toothbrush used to clean this, it didn't get all the plaque out. I had to go get the dental pick or flathead screwdriver and scrape that grime out to see the snap rings that were holding those bearings in. Now I'm driving it down to give myself some clearance to grab this snap ring or lock ring out of the linkage so that I can drive the bearing back out. So if the bearing's right up against the snap ring, it's going to be impossible to pry that snap ring out. And I know if grabbing a hold of these lock rings is not your favorite thing to do, well, take a look at what I'm doing here, because I found that if I'm going to get that lock ring out, what I need to do first is push the screwdriver from the outside edge of the snap ring down into the groove first. So if I'm going to push into the outside, into that groove down, and then pry it up. And if you can't get the screwdriver to push into the groove, down into the groove first, don't try and pry into the ring. The Heim joint for the lower shock. This, even after it was cleaned up in the parts washer, still had that dirt plaque built up in there. So after the bearings are all pressed back in and you're almost done with this job, just to make it last, what I like to do is pack every area with grease, because if grease lives there, water can't. And if there's an empty space, Water can live there, and that's the end of your new linkage.